And they still haven't, it's almost like US. They still don't have the results yet, although the liberal is considerably ahead. There were over 85 candidates. So because of that, it's delaying the tally. But it looks like
The CBC reported today that the conservatives won.
Oh, really? So maybe I didn't.
By a very narrow margin.
Oh, that's mamish good news. I didn't have
How old's your news?
I'm not sure. I looked the last time before I went to sleep, and this morning I opened it up again, but it could be I didn't refresh the screen. So it could be it's not up to date. So let's start again from the Mishnah on Daf Kuf Yud Zayin on the base. Even though today's Kuf Yud Ches, it'll give us a jump start into the sugya. So the Mishnah says as follows: V'chein Beis Habad. Today's shir is titled "This Bud's for You." V'chein Beis Habad. So Yibanu Besela V'gina Achas Al Gam. There was a hillside, and somebody built into the side of the hill a Beis Habad, an oil press. And in those days, their construction was with arches, so there was a roof that extended out of the hillside that they then put topsoil on top of, and that extended the land to be able to cultivate on. And one brother owned the oil press, and the other brother owned the land above it, the plant. The nivchas, and the roof, the archways of the roof of the Beis Habad collapsed. So now the Bal Hagina lost some square footage, some floor area to be able to cultivate. So the halach is Hare Bal Hagina Yoyrid. The Bal Hagina could now come down and plant on the floor of the Beis Habad so that he reclaims his square footage until the owner of the Beis Habad rebuilds his archway. And then it will be incumbent on the guy on top to put new topsoil. So this was an oinus. Someone has a wall, and some tornado came, and it ripped it out and made it fall into Rosh Hashanah. Or if an Elon was ripped out, Beziku, and they caused damage in Rosh Hashanah, Potter, Milashalem, the owner's Potter, it's an oinus. But Nasnalo is man lokot to Elon. What if the Bezdin saw that this Elon is weak? It's going to fall down. So the municipal services did an inspection and realized that this is a menace to society, and therefore they gave him 30 days to cut down the wall, or a lister to cut down the tree, or a lister as a koisel, or to take down the wall. The naflu b'soich hazman, and the homeowner was not negligent because he was going to take it down on time, but they fell before. The engineering assessment was not accurate. It fell before the city assessed that would fall down. Potter, the owner's potter, but la'achar man chayiv. But if they waited past the deadline to cut the tree on the wall, now they're dealing with a menace to society. They're liable for damages that it would cause. But la'achar is man chayiv. But if it fell later, is chayiv. Misha yakosloi samuch l'ginas chader. Someone had a wall right near the garden of his friend, Vinofal, and his wall fell over. So now there's debris from a wall in his littering his neighbor's property. And the owner of the garden says, Zazagit, get rid of your debris. I need to plant here. And the owner says, you know what? My building materials that fell into your property are valuable. I'm not going to bother cleaning it up. You clean it up. You can keep them. The halachas ain't shaymaloi. Rashi says, because you cannot force a matana upon somebody, cannot force a gift on anybody. In ein zer roitza, Rashi says, if this fellow doesn't want, the owner of the union doesn't want the debris that fell into his yard, ein kainloi davar hafkar matana. A davar hafkar matana that ends up in his chotzer will not be koni to him. But what happens, Misha Kibbutz? What if the neighbor says, you know what? I like that suggestion. I'll clean it up. And now I will claim the building materials as a gift from you. So he did it. And then the guy who owned the wall or the tree showed his true colors that he was a fraud. And he was just trying to get the other guy to clean it up. Amalei told him, it only costed you $200 to clean up your yard, but my building materials are worth $500. So I'm just going to pay you for your efforts. So there ain't shoymin loy, because at that point, it's his already. Someone hires a poil to pick for him, to gather for him, tevin or kash. And then after the hard day's work, the worker came over to the owner and said, please pay me. And the employer said, I don't want to pay you. Just take the hay or the teven straw that you gathered. Take that for your pay. Ain't shoymin loy. Rashi asks, what do you mean ain't shoymin loy? Don't we have a rule that shava kesef kekesef? I can pay with anything. So if Rashi, that applies to mazik, but it does not apply to a worker. By a worker, there's a xeris hakosu that says bal tolan schorai. You're not allowed to delay his pay. Pay means what you made up with him to give him, and therefore you have to pay him in cash or with whatever means you originally contracted with him to pay. Misha kibul olav. What happens if the worker says, you know what, I'll take the teven, I'm happy with that. And then once again, the Balabas showed his true colors and he's a fraud. He just wanted to get free labor. Here, I'll pay you in cash, I want my teven. There ain't shoymin loy, because clearly he just wanted to take advantage. Gewaltig. Zogt the Gemara weiter. Nifchasa, you have this wine press, this oil press, its ceiling fell in. How much of its ceiling fell in? The same way the Gemara asked, how much of the floor of the upper apartment fell in? This is a similar case, so we're asking the same question. So Rav Amar Beruba, Ushmul Amar Ba'arba. Rav Amar Beruba, Avol Ba'arba, if it was only 4, Adam Zereya, Chetzav Lamata, the Chetzav Lamayla. People don't have a problem planting in 2 different locations. Ushmul Amar Ba'arba, even if it's only broken by 4 tvachim, it's still enough that the fellow from upstairs can do all of his planting downstairs. Because a person doesn't want to plant half above and half below. We seem to have the exact same Mishnah that discusses the halacha of the upstairs neighbor and downstairs neighbor, and that if the downstairs neighbor doesn't do his job, the upstairs neighbor can move into the downstairs. We have that same halacha lugabe the Beis Habad. Why did the Mishnah have to tell us the same halacha in 2 different formats, in 2 different cases? Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. The Iash Me'inon Dira, if we had the first Mishnah, now it talks about a house that fell down, and the Ben Aliyah is allowed to live in the lower level. So not a house that fell down, a house where the floor opened up, so the renter is allowed to live downstairs. The Hakar Mar Shmuel, you know why? That's where Shmuel said that it's even Ba'arba. I don't want to live halfway upstairs, halfway downstairs. In your private life, in your own home, you don't want to live half upstairs and half downstairs. If it's just a matter of planting, it's a big deal. Avidi inchi desari porta, wherever you find a little bit of an available land, you'll plant there. So maybe in the case of the Beis Habad, Shmuel would be moida that it has to be beruba before you can move down. But if we only had the case of Beis Habad, then I would say bahach Rav. Only by the Shriya does Rav say it has to be nifkas b'roiv. But by the house, Shmuel, that Dalad Amos is enough to disrupt someone's life. No one wants to go downstairs every time he wants to get a pair of underwear. So therefore, Tricha, the Mishnah expressed this halacha in 2 different cases. Nosnoloizman. Besdin, the municipality did an inspection and they determined that your tree is unsafe, your wall is unsafe, take it down. How much time do they give him? The Chamosman Besdin, what is the standard period of time that Besdin gives? Rabbi Yochanan Shloshim Yom is 30 days. And Tosfos shares with us a fascinating tidbit of history. If we look at the top Tosfos, when we can Onulameidim, Zaman Besdin Lefrei Chayva, Ulekamadvarim Tavalamajoim. Today, it's baked into our society that a standard period of time is 30 days. You have 30 days to pay your ticket, right? You have 30 days to, a standard lease is going to be 30 days. 30 days became the standard, the interest across the world. It comes from this Gemara. It comes because Bezdin set up that the normal time frame for things to get done are 30 days, and that's what it is across the board for every type of transaction until today. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel nami d'amar le'il af la'atzmoi ein machzer el shloshim yoyim umiyu l'chol nazikin loy omar sheyehi zman bezin la'majoyim k'mayachal. It's not for all nazakin the le'il gabi nishber kadoi v'loy silkai if his jug broke and he didn't clean it up, or nafla gemaloi, or his camel fell down v'loy hamida. Right, that was the case of Ashir Lashem ki gomal aloi, right? Because it fell on him. Reb Meir Mechayiv Bezekon, there ain't Zman Bezin Shloshim Yom. It's not 30 days there. If it's something that doesn't require much effort to clean up, a jug broke, bring a broom, bring a dustpan, you have it cleaned up, there they don't give 30 days. But for anything more significant, like cleaning up a wall, the standard timing is always 30 days. Okay, gewaltig. Zog to Gemara weiter. Misha haya kaisla. Fragt the Gemara, Hami de Katani Seifa, Heilech Yitzir Sech. The case of the Seifa was he first told the neighbor, you know what, you clean it up yourself and you can keep my building materials. Then he comes around and says, now that you clean up my building materials, I'll pay you for your efforts. I want my building materials. Mechlal de Peninu Askin. It must be speaking that the neighbor had already cleaned it up. Otherwise, what am I paying for? Obviously, he already cleaned it up, and now I want to take advantage of him, and I want it back. So Zok Gemara, time of the Peninu. It's mashma that the only reason why we say ain't shoymeloi, and the neighbor gets to keep the building materials is because he went through the effort and he already cleaned them all up. And he was kind of them by picking them up to move them into a location where it would be appropriate for them to be. Haloi Peninu. What if he didn't clean it up yet? So I told the neighbor, I give you permission to keep my stones and you can clean them up and they'll be yours. Loy, at that point, I could still back out the owner of the wall. Why? Why don't you say the moment the owner of the wall says, I'm happy to give you the building materials, clean them up yourself, instantly the neighbor should be kind if he wants, because they're in his chutzner. The Amar Rabbi Yosy Bar Chanina, Chatzer Shalodim Koine Lo Shalom Yidaitai. Fakert, your chutzner is even koine if you don't even know about it. So why is it that we don't say belongs to him? Now the question here is, why do I need Rabbi Yosy Bar Chanina that Chatzer Shalodim Koine Lo Shalom Yidaitai? This case is Midaitai. I'm telling my neighbor, you see the stones that fell into your yard that you're complaining about, you can keep them. So why do I need this extra chiddush of Rabbi Yosy Bar Chanina that Chatzer Shalodim Koine Lo Shalom Yidaitai? Even if you don't have that rule, in this case it's Midaitai. Okay. But Tosfos points out that we actually need it. Liknei Chatzeri, Aval I loved Rabbi Yosy Bar Chanina, also shaper the ain't koineloi, elahecha do oimid b'tzad tzadei. He has to be. If you don't know like Rabbi Yosy Bar Chanina, then you have to be standing with tzad tzadei. Lakach ki loy peninu loy. Maybe the owner of the neighbor's property, maybe the neighbor wasn't standing by his field when he said you can have it. They met in his medrash and he said you can have it. So maybe you need Rabbi Yosy Bar Chanina so that he should be able to be koined even though he's not there. Zok Gemara, you know when Chatzer Shalodim Koine Lo Shalom Yidaitai, Hanamili Heicha de Kemechaven Laknuyele. That's if the makner wants to be makner the objects to the koina. Aval hacha, here, when the owner of the rocks said you can have him, he was scamming his neighbor. He never wanted to give it. Merely ishtamutihu to come ishtamitli. He was just trying to avoid having to clean it up himself. But he never intended to actually give it. He was just trying to take advantage of his neighbor, and therefore his neighbor won't be konyet until he actually picks it up and makes a kinyan hagbah on it, and that's when he's going to be konyet. Zog to Gemara weiter. Now we're speaking about the person who hired workers, and when it came to pay, he didn't want to pay cash. He wanted to pay with beer bottle deposits that he was going to give back to the beer store. Utricha. We need both cases. The case of the Reisha, which talks about cleaning up the rocks that fell into your neighbor's property, and the case of the employees who accepted to be paid with the teven and cash, and then the Baal Bayis changed his mind. The Yashmin lahach kamais. If we only had the case of the neighbors where my wall fell into my neighbor's property, if I say you can keep my rocks, you can clean them up yourself, ain't shaymin. There, you know why you don't listen to him? You should do less like igrabay. I don't owe my neighbor anything. My neighbor doesn't have any pressing reason to need anything from me. So you know what? I'm not interested in your rocks. Clean your rocks up on your own. Avalacha here, the employees want to get paid. They need the balabais to pay them. The Isla Agrabay. Maybe when you're trying to get money out of somebody, you have to accept whatever they're going to offer. Maybe you do listen to the balabais, and he could force them to accept teven and cash. You know why? Because there's a saying. The Amri Inchi, people say, Mame Rishusach, if someone owes you money, so he has something of yours, Pe'eri Afra, take anything you can get from him. Whatever you're able to get out of him, grab, because you never know if you're going to get paid. So maybe in the case of teven and cash, when I say take the teven and cash instead of pay, maybe they have to accept it. Rashi, the Lakutei Rashi, let me just focus on the Lakutei Rashi a little bit. The Amri Inchi, Mikra Nafkalon, we learned it out of a pasuk, the per kama, the Bava kama, in the first parak of Bava kama, Naftesim and Alf, Damar Avuna, or Kesef Yishalim, I made of Sedeyu, Esrab Nachman Avuna, Yosef Labishab, Kesef, Mamri Yishuzach, Ha'ish Asher Ata Noishaboy, someone who owes you money, Pe'eri Subin Bishaviyan, take whatever he's willing to give you, because that might be your only opportunity to collect. So maybe when it comes to employees who want to get paid, maybe we should force them to accept that, because at least they're going to get something. Kamash will no, they don't have to accept that. They are allowed to demand their proper wages. Yashmin Hacha, and if the Mishnah only told us the case of wages, that they don't have to accept teven and cash, Hacha she mishakibel alav ain't shayman. Maybe davke by employees, if they took the deal, they get to keep the cash in teven, and the owner cannot back out. Mishum the Isla Agrabay, because being that he owes them money, and now they collected money that he owes them, we're not letting him take that money back. But in the case of neighbors, the less Agrabay, neither party owes anybody anything. So the owner of the rocks don't owe anything to the owner of the property next door. Maybe you would allow him to retract and take his avana back. That's where the Mishnah expresses halacha side by an employee and side by a neighbor. Ain't shaymin. The halacha is ain't shaymin, and that's referring to the first ain't shaymin. If I tell you, you clean up the bricks yourself and you can keep it, ain't shaymin. He doesn't have to accept that. He can say no. They're your bricks. Get rid of them. We actually have a brisa that contradicts our Mishnah and says that shoymin loy. So I take back what I said. I said it wrong. It's going on the second half of the Mishnah. The second half of the Mishnah says, if I say take the cash for teven instead of pay, they have a right to refuse. The problem is we have a brisa that says they don't have a right to refuse. So it's a stira. The brisa seems to be a stira to our Mishnah. Amar Rav Nachman lo kasha. Kan b'shaloi, kan b'shalchavei. If I told them to work on my property, there I have to pay him in full. But if they worked on my friend's property, then I don't have to pay them in full. What is the justification for that? B'shalchavei is a Rashi. And the svara is very simple. If you're working on my property, all that stuff is mine. And I have a chiv to pay you. And you weren't koine anything because it's mine. Mashenkin b'shal chaveroi, where I don't owe you anything because my friend owes you because you worked on his property, you didn't work on my property. So therefore, you don't really have any claim on me. That's where you would listen to the balabais and you let them keep, you force them to keep as pay what they cut. The Gemara is about to ask that question. The Gemara is about to ask that question. Zokt Rashi, Zokt the Gemara weiter, exactly the Gemara's kasha. Eisvei, I'm sorry, not Eisvei, before that. The Tanya, I'm sorry, Amalei Rabbi Rav Nachman, Bishaloi, my time. Why is it that if he worked on my field, on my property, I'm mechuyev to pay, and I can't say, Toil Masha Sisa B'Scharecha, take the hay. The Amalei, Agra Aloch, you owe me money. We made a deal, you have to pay me. You're mechuyev to pay me. Well, which is exactly what he's asking. Just because I rented you, I hired you to work on my chaver's property, that makes me less mechuyev? Avada mechuyev. And I'll prove it to you from a brayso that we learned many times before. The Tanya, I tell a poil, I need you to work for me. And you fool him. But the poil is working under the understanding that he's working for you. So the loch is noisin lois charim misholim. You're mechuyev as someone who hired these workers and made a commitment to pay them. You got to pay them in full. So there should be no difference between mishaloi and mishal chaveroi. Either way, it should be ein shaymeloi. Either way, you should be mechuyev to pay their wages as you made up with them and not throw hay and temen at them. Now then, as a yored l'soich sadei chavera shalemi daitoi, you now benefited your friend. Now you can go back and claim from your friend what you're behind him. But as far as your commitment towards the employees, of you mechuyev to pay. So we're back to the drawing board. What is the brisa who holds shoymin loy? Under what circumstances can the person who hired these employees force them to accept heaven and cash instead of their pay? The place where you can force them to accept is if they work bishal hefker. Let's see Rashi. Bishal hefker, zok Rashi shoymin loy. There, the person who hired them could force them to accept the teven and the cash. Why? The Omer lay kni be'at the it's hefker. I don't own any of the product, so therefore I could tell them, you go be zoiche from the hefker, you go be kind. Rab Nachman Temei. This is Rab Nachman. The Omer le'il. I'm not being Metzia lechaveri lekol lechaveri. I hired you, right? So you're picking up the Metzia on my behalf. You were gathering Tevin on my behalf. So why doesn't the Tevin belong to me? The teretz is because Rav Nachman holds, I'm Metzia lechaveri lekol lechaveri. And I'm not kohen, it's hefker. Nimtza she'ein pulos hayolav. I'm not responsible for your work because it's not mine. I didn't get any cash from you. I didn't get any tevin from you because lekol lechaveri. And therefore, ve'ein kam bal tolim. I have no chiv to pay you anymore. So the Balta was hefker, and I was never koine. What you tried to get from me, because of that, there will be no itch about Tolan. Therefore, I can tell the workers, sorry, you're out of luck. It's not similar to the case where I told you to work in my friend's property. There, I can't tell him be zoiche in the teven and cash. It's not his. It's not hefker. It belongs to the friend. But in the case of hefker, I have a way for them to get paid. I don't owe you money on Solon because you didn't do anything for me, and you have a way to get paid by being zoiche in the teven and cash that you pay. Even if he didn't say schar chal balabayis, al korchay schar alof. In a case where I tell you to work on my friend's property, where you have no recourse, you can't take the product from my friend's property. It's not hefker. And I didn't tell you befairs that he's going to pay you. I let you believe that I was going to pay you. There, I have to pay. Avalocha, here you have an option. You have an option to take the hefker, and you'll get it. And therefore, avalocha loy. That is this step in the Gemara, which the Gemara will swiftly slug up. But I'll call upon at this step in the Gemara holds that by hefker, I should be able to say, go be coin it, and I'm not paying you. Frank the Gemara, Esrei Rabbal or Rabnan. Metzias poilat. You're basing this whole thing on the fact that I'm like be a Metzia l'chaver, and therefore me, who directed you to go gather tevin from hefker, I didn't get it. I wasn't kind it because when you picked it up, I wasn't kind it because of a makbia Metzia l'chaver. This isn't a case of a makbia Metzia l'chaver. This is a case where I hired you to do it specifically for me. Now the halacha there is very different because we learned the brisa. Metzias poyel atzman. What if I hire you? I hire you to plow for me, and while you're plowing my field, you find a ring. That ring does not belong to the balabayis. That ring belongs to the poyel. Emasai bisman shomer balabayis, shomer loy balabayis, nachei shimi ayoyim or adar imi ayoyim. I hire you for a specific purpose to do a specific job, not for general labor, and therefore finding the ring was not part of your work description. So when you find the ring as a worker, you're allowed to keep it. But if I said, just do with me general labor, whatever I need you to do today, do for me, there Metzia says labalabais. There what you picked up, avada goes to the balabais, because it's yad hapoil, ki yad balabais. It's not a case of a makbiyah sil chaveri. So if that's the case, if I had a poil work in hefker, if I told the poil to gather tevin and cash from hefker, guess what? I am koined. If I am koined, I should be mechuyev to pay him cash. So once again, what's the svar of Shaiman loy? Rab Nachman loy kasha kan bahagba kan bahabata. It all depends on whether or not the worker was koined. If he made hagba, if he lifted up every bit of tevin and cash, yes, I will be koined, and therefore ain't Shaiman loy. But what if I just needed him to watch the tevin and cash in the field, or let's say the tevin and the cash was lying in the field on top of a mountain, and I just needed to sweep it off the side of the mountain, and then it would fall into my property. So he was able to transfer the tevin and cash to me without actually picking it up and making a kinyan. He just looked at it. That would not be a kinyan. And therefore, the habata, where the owner, the person who hired these workers, was not kind anything, it's still hefker. He could tell the poil, I'm not going to pay you. Rather, just take what you gathered. That'll be your pay. Let's see Rashi. I say Rabbi Rav Nachman, l'meimar the poil lav b'chlal hamakbiyah metzila chaverehu. A poil is not like anybody else. Elakiyad balabayisu. V'kanya balabayis bagbad the poil. And the value of the balabayis was going to all this tevin and cash when the poil picked it up. Afilu omar loya say imi melocha stam. Even if, as the Brisa proves, even if you say stam work for me, whatever you pick up is mine. But over here, I specifically told you, gather tevin for me. So for sure here, when those employees pick up the tevin and cash, it's mine. Make sense? So let's see Rashi. In both cases, you're working for Shul Hefker. Masnisa that says, ain't shayim, I got to pay you in cash. It's kisa sochroi lelake tevin the cash, bahagbo the poil. They have to lift it up and make a kinyan. Hagbo is the ultimate kinyan. Since I'm coining the product, they can't be coined anymore in the hefker. It's mine. Now it's a question is, am I paying you in product or paying you in cash? My chiyuv is to pay you in cash because now you're my employee, and there's Isabel Tolan, which dictates I have to pay you in cash. But uva brisa, where I can force them to take the tevin and cash, is kisasachroi lemaleches habota. I just want you to watch it. Going to lishmor, either to watch it, or just to sweep it off a high plateau onto a lower plateau. So they're never been koined. They're just sweeping it over and not lifting it up. The lek hagbah. So there was physically no hagbah involved. So therefore, it's still hefker. The Amarle, now the person who hired his employees can tell them, Akati loy zechoye be'ano. I was never koined them. So therefore, I don't have a chiyuv of baltolen, and you have all this hefker product, zil at zechiba.
So the reason is not this to give away.
The only time Rashi said it earlier, it triggers a baltolen is if you do the work for me. But if I wasn't koined it, so I didn't get anything from it. So therefore, there's no Isser baltolen triggered.
I didn't get anything from it.
Because I wasn't koined anything.
My job was to watch it.
So Rashi seems to say that if I don't get anything from you, there's no din baltolen. Let's look at the Bishal Hefker. And Rashi says, if it belongs to somebody, then I can't tell them to grab it because it's not Hefker. I'm sorry, it goes over here. I'm not responsible to pay you because I didn't get anything from you. So you're asking, maybe when do you say if I hire you to be cutting it for me? But if I hired you just to look at it and you did that, there should be pulos and there should be a baltol. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
So that I hear that because that's a good distinction. Fakert, the Gemara holds if it's Hefker, then I can tell you Toyel Masha Siza Pulosecha. Right? The Gemara answered when it's Hefker, there I could say take it. You're telling me when it's Hefker, I can't say take it because it's not mine to give. Rashi is Fakert. By Hagbah, he cannot give it. That's right. Masnisin, the Mishnah is speaking, the Mishnah where it says, Ein Shoymeloi, where he cannot give it, it's Kishasachway Lalake, Teven Bekash Bahagbah the Poil. Why? Because I was kind of all that product when you did it, and therefore there's a Chiyav on me of Baltolan. Masha Enkein Uber Braisa, where it says Shoymeloi, it's where I hire you without making a kinyan, and therefore there won't be an Isser of Baltolan. But you're asking, Memela, there's no Isser Baltolan if I hire you to gather it for me and you didn't accomplish what you were hired to do. You're asking me here, I accomplished what I was hired to do. I was never hired to make a kinyan. So why is there no Isser Baltolan? And I hear that kasha. I'm going to have to think about that. Let's see if he says here anything. No. Okay. So that's the Gemara. And that's the end of the Gemara. Because our Gemara concludes that Habata is not Kohen. But that's actually a Shaila. Omar Rabba, Habata behefker tenoihi. So now we're going into a whole new sugya. If you look at Hefker, does that constitute a Kinyan? Clearly, our Gemara holds it's not a Kinyan, right? And that's the whole premise upon which we say Shoymin. So Omar Rabba, Habata behefker tenoihi. If someone looks at Hefker to be koined, he's going to be koined. And that's a machlokes tonight. Did not be learned. Shoymeri sefiche shavias. The Beis HaMikdash needed people to watch the barley that was growing so that they would have it when it comes to bring the carbon omer. So they actually got paid by the Beis HaMikdash to watch these barley growing so that no one should take them. So that we'll have the omer that we need for the carbon omer. Noitlin schar mit Trumas Alishka. How do they get paid? From the Trumas Alishka, from the public purse. Trumas Alishka is the money that's set aside to buy carbonas. So this is part of the process of the carbon omer, and therefore it's paid for from the Trumas Alishka. Rabbi Yosy omer, no, we can even have volunteers. Haroitza misnadiv, who anyone who wants to volunteer can watch that crop for free. But for Shomer Chinam, he'll be a Shomer Chinam because he's not getting paid. Amr Loi, the Rabbanan told me a bad idea. Ata Omer Kain, you're saying that a Shomer Chinam, a person is allowed to do it as a volunteer and doesn't have to accept pay? If that's the case, then Ein Boy Mishal Tzibur. Then the carbon Omer is not going to be Mishal Tzibur. Why not, Dr. Rashi? Im Nishmalach, if we listen to you, and we allow volunteers to watch it, lo yaviu omer ushtei alechem mishal tzibur. The omer the shalechem will not be mishal tzibur, el mishal yachid. It's going to be a personal carbon, and that's not a good carbon because a carbon tzibur has to be from the tzibur. You know why? Shekanam in the hefker b'shvirasai. The Balti were merely watching it; they were kind it. Clearly, the Rabbanan here hold the svirlu habat the kanya behefker hoil v'dover terechu. It's not just klotzing. Watching something involves effort. V'daitei lekach al yodei nishma. So let's say this is the machlokes. The Tanakh is over about the hefker kani, and therefore the shomer who would be working for free would be kanya the hefker. It would become theirs, and now these are personal. Now these are personal barley. You can't use that for a communal carbon. If you pay them, so then they're working for the Beis Hamikdash, and the produce belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. But if you don't pay them then it's personal, and you cannot use it as a carbon. Anyway, they're not kind. So it's still hefker even after we watch it. When does hektish take possession of it? When they actually cut it down and take it into the Beis Hamikdash, at that point, the community, the communal pocket, is going to be coined, and it'll be no problem. So what does it mean? If we follow your method and we let the shomer work for free, according to our shita, that habota behefker's kaina ein oimer ushtei alechem boy mishal tzibur. Because according to Rabbi Yosy, it's not a problem because he holds habota behefker's lekani. It's using your method with our psak, we're going to have a problem. Amar Rava, Zokravi, no, you don't have a rye from here. I'm going to show you both ways. Either both Rabbi Yosy and the Chum could agree that habota is kaina, or they could both agree that it's not kaina. Amar Rava loy, the chula ama habota behefker kaina. Everybody goes that it's kaina. So oibazoi, if it's kaina, everybody should agree, even Rabbi Yosy should agree that you can't use it. No, because yes, I was kaina, but I'm giving it over to hektish with the ganze hearts. And if I'm giving it over with the ganze hearts, even though I was kaina at some point, now it belongs to the community. Question is, the Rabbanan have a problem. Maybe when the shomer, the volunteer, gives the product, gives the barley to hektish, he's not really meaning to be maked completely. He's withholding something, and therefore it would end up being a carbon yochid. That's the machlokes. Rabban Sarvi yahavin and loy agra. You have to pay, because if you don't pay, the loy chayshinon shema loy yimshrem yofa yofa. This Gemara is not talking about Shmuel. Oh, really? Oh, gewaltig. Rabbi Yosy Savar, Rabbi Yosy holds. I'm sorry? Oh, that's right. It's a Shalom Zom Shmuel. That's right. Very good. Rabbi Yosy Savar, loy chayshinon shema loy yimshrem yofa yofa. Rabbi Yosy, I'm not concerned. It will be a complete gift. So again, Uma Ata Omer, what was the conversation that the Rabban are saying? Because according to Rabbi Yosy, like Chashina wouldn't be a problem. So it's the same thing. If we follow your psak and we allow a volunteer to watch him, according to our shita that we're choishet, so that's an option to say they both hold that about the iskain. But it's possible that Tzai Rabbi Yosy saying the Chum hold about the Bavka is not koina. So if it's not koina, there should surely be no problem here. You know what the problem is? You know why we pay? That's we wouldn't have to pay because no one's concerned. It could be nickname, it could be cuddly to the volunteer watchman, and then he gives it over. The problem here is the reason why we insist on paying is because there could be bullies that will steal grain from people. But if they know that it belongs to the Beis Hamikdash, they're not going to start up with the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, by paying, it creates a little bit of a tumult. Everybody will know, oh, these watchmen are being paid to watch hektish. No one's going to cheper with them. No one's going to come and try to steal that barley because they'll know this is the Beis Hamikdash's barley. So if that happens, very simple. Because of that, they were masakin that you have to pay. So they're not paying for a watchman. They don't really, the volunteers are fine. The reason why they're paying is just to create a tumult that everyone should know this is Hektish's product. So therefore, for sure, this barley that is given to the base of Mikdash will be communal because everybody agrees. It'll be handed over properly. So then, what could be the problem? There's a takana that the Trumas Alishka, the communal pot, has to give 4 zuzim of money to these watchmen. Why? So that any bully who wants to steal the barley won't, because this belongs to the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore they have to accept it. Rabbi Yosy holds no, we never made such a takana, and you don't have to force them to take money. Now let's stop a second. What happens if I don't take the money and I was supposed to take the money? That has zero impact on the Korban Omer. But the problem is now there's 4. There's what are this? There's how much were they mistaken to pay? Whatever they're mistaken to pay, there's 4 zuz sitting in the lishka that really belong to a person. What are you going to do if they buy a carbon oil for a tumid? What if they buy a carbon tumid with that money? They were buying a carbon tumid with personal money. We don't know which 4 zuzim those are, and therefore there'll be a problem. According to you, that we allow a volunteer, we allow him to refuse to take that money. According to us, where we say he has to take that money, other karbanos that you're going to buy from the Trumas Alishka will end up being bought from their personal money, and it will not be brought Mishal Tzibur. The whole machlokes is whether or not there was a takana that we forced the shayrim to take pay to create a buzz that everybody should know that this is the property of Hekdesh. If you wanted to bring Zevel into Rishus Harabim because you were going to be transporting it to your field and you needed to get it there, you cannot leave it even for a moment in Rishus Harabim. You could bring it out. It's got to go straight to the person who's going to be spreading it, and it's got to go straight over. You can't linger in Rishus Harabim. Can't let it sit there and process for a month. It's got to be. It's in automotive terms. There's something called on-time delivery. The automakers no longer stock parts. As they need parts, they have the delivery of the parts scheduled to arrive at the factory as they need them. That's why if there's a transportation backup, it wreaks havoc in automotive manufacturing. If you remember when the big protests by COVID, when they shut the border down, it literally shut down automakers because they don't have inventory of parts. They have their system scheduled to receive the parts as they're building it. So it's the same thing here. Everything's got to be synchronized perfectly. When the person is taking the zevel out, there's got to be somebody there waiting to take it away. Ein shoyrin tit rishus harabim. You're not allowed to soak tit in rishus harabim. Rashi says mekoimish yesh sheshoyrin nois in yom harabim tzolver b'makom echad. They'll take mud, pile it up, and let it sit there. You're not allowed to do that. Vein loivnim leveinim. You're not allowed to make bricks. The way they would build bricks is they would smear a big layer of tit, and then they would cut bricks into it, and then they would let it dry up, and then you have bricks. You're not allowed to do that again in rishus harabim. If you were building a building, and I guess the wall was built right up against the property line, you could mix the cement to use for bricklaying in Rishus Harabim. You can't make bricks in Rishus Harabim because that takes time. But just to make the cement to use right away, that you're allowed to do. What if you're building Rishus Harabim? Because you're building a building and it's right on the property line. So the halach is maybe avonim, maybe the. You can't pile up bricks 3 days before. You can't get a delivery from Home Depot of bricks, let them sit there for a week till the bricklayers come. No. As the bricks are delivered, the bricklayers got to be putting them on the wall. You're not allowed to leave it in the Rishus Harabim for a second. And if it did any damage, the halacha is mishalim hizik. You got to pay, even in that little period of time. You would have to pay if it did any damage. No, you are allowed to prepare it 30 days before. It seems like our Mishnah would not be consistent with Rabbi Yehuda. Why? The Tanya Rabbi Yehuda, the Shas Oitzos Volim, during the time of the year where everybody would take their zevel out into the street, they were allowed to pile it up for 30 days. Why? so that people will stomp on it. I'm sure they'll be so thankful to you that they have all this mud on their shoes. Why? When we got the land, this is one of the conditions, since it's needed by everybody in order to make industry function. This was one of the Tanoim that's allowed. So, in what way do we see that Rabbi Yehuda disagrees? So it seems like Rabbi Yehuda gives more time, right? It seems like Rabbi Yehuda gives more time. I'm sorry. So that's not what the kasha of Rabbi Yehuda is. The kasha of Rabbi Yehuda is Rabbi Yehuda says you're allowed to do it, and therefore it's mashma that Rabbi Yehuda would hold that you're not liable for damage. The Mishnah says you're liable for any damage that occurs from this. It's mashma from Rabbi Yehuda that you would not be liable for damage. And for the Gemara, feel him Rabbi Yehuda, moide Rabbi Yehuda shem hizik chayv l'shal. Rabbi Yehuda's moide that even though you have a right to keep your stuff out there, but avad if it causes damage, you'll be chayv. So you might ask me, okay, so that solves that problem. But l'maitzer Rabbi Yehuda gives you 30 days, and the Mishnah gives you 0 days, right? So why isn't that a problem? Right? So there's two differences between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chum. The first difference we thought is that Rabbi Yehuda told you to be potter to pay if there's damage in the meantime when you had a right to keep your stuff in your Rishus Rabbim. The Mishnah says you're chayiv right away. So for that, the Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda is also molded that you're chayiv. What about the second difference? So Rashi and Tosfos both say the Mishnah also agrees to Rabbi Yehuda that you have 30 days. The reason why the Mishnah says get it in and out quickly is because since we know everybody agrees that you're liable for any damage that your items cause, so the Mishnah is giving you an extaiva. Don't take advantage of the 30 days that Yeshua made the Tanai. Get rid of it quickly. Avoid problems. Zok to Gemara. I feel to Rabbi Yehuda, Moed Rabbi Yehuda, Shem Hizik Chayv L'Shalom, Vatanya Moed Rabbi Yehuda. But now we learned Moed Rabbi Yehuda b'ner Chanukah Show Potter B'nei Shu Oisha B'Rishus. So don't you see my love Rishus best? Don't you see that when you have Rishus to do something, that automatically patters you if it causes damage? Because by Ner Chanukah you're potter. So no, Chanukah is different. It's not Rishus Bezdin. Lo Rishus the mitzvah. If it's a mitzvah to put it out, that's where you'd be potter. But if Bezdin gives you a certain allowance to put your stuff outside, that doesn't mean that you're indemnified. If it causes any damage, your body you have to pay. I've a time we learned called Elu Sha'amru Mutarin Lakalkal B'Shus Rabim Im Hizik Chayv L'Shalim Rabbi Yehuda Poiter. So Rabbi Yehuda in fact says you are potter. So it doesn't stem with our Mishnah. So in fact, our Mishnah will not stem with Rabbi Yehuda because Rabbi Yehuda says you're going to be potter to pay if it damages, and the Mishnah says you're chayv to pay if it damages. Amar Abaye, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon, Kulu Svir Lu, they all hold. Whenever the Chacham give you rishus to do something, v'hizik, and you ended up causing damage because of that rishus, potter you'll be potter. Rabbi Yehuda Amarin, our case, since you're allowed to put your manure outside on the street, therefore, if someone gets hurt by it, if it does damage, you're going to be potter. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel the Tana. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Eimer, Af Mesakan Hu Es Malachtoi Lifnei Shloshim Yom. That's our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is you're allowed to keep it there 30 days before, and it's mashma that it would be mutter. Rashi says the koyat hadakama damar mhizik mishaling the kamal iu after shloshim yom kodim l'chein misaken upotter. So Rashi says the Gemara clearly learns that Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel holds it will be potter, and Rabbi Shimon the Tanan hayam mamido ve'aliyah. What happens if you had an oven and you had an oven that you wanted to set up and you lived on the second floor? You need to fireproof it because what happens if it burns through and damages the guy below? So tzarich sheitachtov maziva shloisha tvachim. You have to have 3 tvachim that's about 9 inches of fireproofed material underneath. So you can't put the oven on a combustible floor. It has to be on a thick fireproof floor. Uvekira, which doesn't make as much heat as an oven, tefach only a tefach. And even though you're allowed to do it, then hizik mishal mashezik. Nevertheless, even though you took the necessary precautions, should it cause a fire, you're still mukhliv to pay. But if I did what was required of me and I had the proper fireproofing there, avada I'll be potter for damages. The way bricklaying, the way building used to work is there was a series of contractors that worked together as a group. And we're going to see how they work together. And when they work together as a group, if there's a situation of Adam Hamazik, then the contractor, the individual that caused that damage, has to pay. But what if there was no Adam Hamazik there, but the job that they did cause damage? Then as a group, being that they're all part of the contract, they're all mukhliv to share the loss. So let's have a look. Hachatzav, the guy who takes it off the mountain, he's the guy who works in the quarry, Shemasar Lasatas. He handed it over already to the person who smooths out the stone. Hasatas Chayiv. Should the Satas drop the rock and damage somebody at that point, the Satas is Chayiv, because we look at that like Gira delay, like Odom Hamas. Hasatas Shemasar Lachamer. The Satas gives it to the person who's shipping it to site. And now the Chamor drops it and causes damage. HaChamor Chayiv. HaChamor Shenuasar Lakativ. The Chamor takes it to the job site and gives it to the person who's going to go up on the scaffold and hand it to the bricklayer. Hakatav Chayiv. Now, if it falls out of that guy's hand, he's Chayiv. Hakatav Shemasar Labanoi. What about the Katav who gave it to the actual bricklayer? Habanoi Chayiv. The bricklayer is Chayiv if he drops it. Habanoi Shemasar Ladricho. The bricklayer actually gives it over to a supervisor who makes sure that the bricklayer might just put the brick down, but the supervisor makes sure that the brick sits perfectly in the row, doesn't stick out to the right, to the left, in or out. Then the Drichel's Chayiv. So that's if it actually fell out of somebody's hands, and therefore the Chayiv al Adam Amazik, only their Chayiv, not the whole group of contractors. But if it was already put on the row and it's set there, and then somehow it fell off, Vizika, now Kulam Chayav and Lashalom, because we look at them all like one contractor. Because I guess they sort of work together in the group. We have another brayso that says the last guy would be chayiv, and they wouldn't potter. If it was bekablanos, then the way it's structured is, even though there's no general contractor, we look at them like they're all working together, and they're their own general contractor, so they're all mukhliv for the liability of the negligence of their work. But if each guy is being paid by the hour by the owner, and the owner is the general contractor, well, then the last guy that was there who didn't place it properly, he's the one who's going to be mechuyev. Should we stop here? Okay, we'll stop here. Tomorrow we have a smaller daf. We will be starting Bava Basra tomorrow. So I'll ask them to bring the Bava Basra Gemara. Tomorrow I will not be here in person. I'll be saying shir on Zoom if someone could turn on the television. Bez Hashem, I'll be back for Thursday morning. Yeah.